Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Practical Founders Podcast, where every week we hear an amazing story from a serious founder who built a valuable software company and did it without big funding. I'm your host, Greg Head, and this week my guest is John Stewart, the former CEO and founder of MapAnything. MapAnything was an early Salesforce app that worked in the ecosystem, connected to Salesforce, and sold to Salesforce customers that allowed you to see your contacts on a map. That quickly evolved into routing for field sales and field service with a sophisticated optimization engine. This is a story of succeeding in the Salesforce ecosystem, bootstrapping, and then taking off. It was a rocket ride company, and John also took rocket fuel VC funding to help grow fast before selling to Salesforce for $250 million. So it's a great episode where he talks about working with Salesforce, how he grew the business, where he's at, and his new venture, because he's doing another turn at the software game. And we're live with John Stewart. Welcome to the Practical Founders Podcast, John.
Thank you for having me, Greg.
Yeah. You've got an amazing story. It's a pretty rare one. I hear a lot about services founders turning their business into a software company, but we don't often hear about those bootstrap, which you've done. We don't often hear about those bootstrap companies turning into funding companies, which you've also done and done successfully. So I'm excited to learn about your journey here and your new venture, fastbreak.ai. So really appreciate that. You're in Charlotte, North Carolina these days, right?
I am. I've been here since 2008.
And is there much of a tech center there in Charlotte?
It's getting better. I think it's getting a lot better. I would say it would be phi tech, if anything. I think the challenge that Charlotte had or has is there hasn't been a lot of exits, and those exits are typically what drive the next generation of founders as people pour their capital back into the locality. Mark McDowell and the Charlotte Fund are doing good work in that regard. They're getting a lot of exited founders from Charlotte to put money back into the Charlotte community. But, when I first started raising and came here, I had to go to New York and San Francisco for our money. So there wasn't the funds that were here were not really aligned for true VC tech startups.
Yeah, so we're old enough to have been in cities where there wasn't much software going on, and we see ecosystems build. And you're right; those big wins, those big exits, create a wave of new talent and new funding and new excitement, and that keeps building on itself. So, MapAnything is one of the Charlotte success stories. Would you say that grew funding and exited and has doing it again and helping out in the ecosystem?
Yeah, so we were operational in Charlotte from when we were founded in 2009 to when we exited in 2019. It created a presence for Salesforce here as well, which didn't have much of a presence. So I think that was good for the community as well.
Oh, good. Yeah, so let's talk about your exit. Then we'll go back and talk about your journey. That was a 10-year journey with MapAnything.
It was.
Where did it end with Salesforce? Reportedly, it was sold for $225 million. You raised some funding along the way. How big was MapAnything when you sold it in 2019 to Salesforce?
So we sold it for $249 million, $250.
Okay.
We were doing $22.5 million in recurring revenue when they made us an offer. We were $25 million by the time the transaction closed.
Okay. How many employees back then?
We peaked at 225 employees.
Wow.
Yeah, so quite a few. We were international, by the way. We had an office in Sydney, Australia. We had an office in London at the time. We invested heavily in sales and distribution globally.
Yeah. So, that's a scaled up company. It isn't a $100 million company, which used to be the old milestone in VC funded land to go public and get out. But that's a sizable company and you grew it really fast. So, well, I guess you'd say 10 years, an overnight success in 10 years. Did you feel like that was fast, or did you feel like that was,
I felt like it was a lifetime.
You're always behind, it was a slog? Yeah.
It was a lifetime. So the company, of course, transformed itself. So we started out as a Salesforce.com services shop. in 2009. And it
Hmm.
wasn't until 2011 that one of our customers who we were doing services for on the Salesforce platform said, hey, the thing that we really want to be able to do is see where our dumpsters on a map. By the way, shout out to Cardella Waste in New Jersey, who are still operational. So
Okay.
we built the first version of MapAnything, which was a little more than just pins on a map. Over time, that morphed
Hmm.
into something special. But when we, when we first launched the product, it really was an afterthought. We put that product in the App Exchange in 2012, January 2012, and it was sort of just ignored. But after a year of basically just taking credit cards whenever someone sent in an email, we
Hmm.
looked and said, hey, that's $90,000 in recurring revenue without really trying. So,
Hmm.
we bootstrapped it, but not because I wanted to bootstrap it, so to speak, because I knew software companies took money. It was at the time Accenture, IBM, all of them were rolling up Salesforce.com services shop. So when I attempted to raise money, people's attitude was, why would you destroy a perfectly good Salesforce services business to do this silly thing of building on Salesforce? Salesforce isn't a platform. Now, I know today that's ridiculous to hear
Yeah.
that, but in
Yeah.
2000, 12 and 13 and early
Yeah.
14 when I was doing it, that was not the case. Salesforce was not the monster it is today. So
Yes.
what we had was a situation where I was sort of forced to bootstrap. And the thing was, the growth was great. We weren't
Because
from,
you were a services company, dev
Mhm.
services, you building Salesforce, implementing and customizing Salesforce.
Correct. We were every dollar in revenue, we were pouring it back into services revenue. We're pouring it back into the software development and go to market motions. And we
Hmm.
really did need capital. And we actually, when we got enough recurring revenue, in which, amazingly enough, we got ourselves to about, I think it was 600,000 recurring revenue in about 2.5 years. So this is early 2014 timeframe. We took
Hmm.
a SaaS revenue loan, which is a totally new concept. It was very
Yeah.
non-dilutive. This was our friends at
Yep.
Letter Capital, and
Lighter capital.
they gave us the money, and 100% of that money we used for sales and marketing events called these Salesforce World Tours. And so I was all about
Yeah.
building brand and brand recognition and brand gravitas. So, we took venture capital for 100% the right reason when we finally did take it from Graycroft. That was
Well,
December.
John, let me start you there. Let me stop you there. We'll talk about kind of your growth years. Let's talk about this services to product transition because so many Salesforce services shops, again, there's a grow and sell trajectory for those kind of services
Sure.
shops. You were saying there was some roll up there, and but a lot of services founders look at the SaaS multiples game, which was starting to get sexy back
Hmm.
then. You could see the SaaS in 2010, 2015. SaaS was still new, and Salesforce was still growing into the monster it is. But by 2015, people were saying the money's over here in SaaS. Did you try dozens of product ideas, or was just this one thing that you had built on the
We built
Force.com platform that started to grow? Or how did you make, and how did you sell off your services company and get to the other side? Or how did you make that transition?
we had an offer. We had an offer from a
Okay.
services group in Atlanta, but
Mm,
again, they just really wanted the services business. They hadn't wanted nothing to do with software. Now, the reason I was
right.
so opposed to just having a services business, because unless you get massive scale, and don't get me wrong, you can
Yeah.
get massive scale, and then you can have
Yeah.
quite nice, I would say, outcomes on that.
Yeah.
Unless you get massive scale, the multiples are not fantastic. I know this because was
Yeah.
the company I had before was an engineering services company that I created and ran for 6 years. So, my MapAnything journey was actually my second outcome and second exit. The prior one was something I did 100% bootstrapping, no investment at all. I was the sole proprietor. I sold that for $3 million to a larger engineering services firms. We specialized in, finite element analysis, predictive engineering, mostly military, aerospace, and defense. And I was sort of turned off a little bit by, outcomes for services companies, not understanding that if you were able to get to
All that
us,
work and just for that result. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
it was fine. It was $3 million outcome, but unless you can get the company to 50-60 million dollars in services, it's really hard to really have that amazing, sort of storybook like outcome. So
Hmm.
when we were going through the process of deciding what we wanted to be, once we realized that the App Exchange was a real thing, you could build a software business on it,
Hmm.
even though there was only really one example of it at the time, that was Viva.
Yeah.
We actually had four products, by the way. So we put out four products
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
were a result of our
Yeah.
consulting work. And the market always tells you what you are, and the market told us very quickly, you are MapAnything. And so the other ones sort of went to the wayside.
Yeah.
So we grew that organically to about $2.2 million in recurring revenue when we finally took money from Greycroft in December of 2014.
Did you wind down your services business
When we took money,
or?
that was the end of the services
Yeah.
business. That was the very end of it. So
Okay.
we literally wound it down just like that. So
So you had a Salesforce dev shop at the same time, MapAnything, which became known as see your Salesforce data on a map, right? Uh,
that's where it started.
you got MapAnything to 2.2 million before you turned off your services.
We did,
So you were funding the business, I guess, through your services.
uh, we did, and it was at the time we did that. So by the way, the business was doing $2.8 million in revenue. 600,000 at that point was still services when we just basically threw it away. Had no interest
I
at the
see.
point.
Okay, yeah, you just
So
wound it
the
down. Yeah,
2.2 million was just the MapAnything
that's the
recurring
software.
revenue piece, the
Yeah.
software piece. We focused on that, and again, we took money for the right reason, which was we were doing 2.2 million in recurring revenue when we did our Series A. It was a
Yeah.
$7.5 million Series A by Greycroft, and we piled
Hmm.
every last penny of it into sales and marketing. And
So you went from services to software bootstrapped, and
mm-hmm,
then you turned on VC. So this is a story that
turned on VC.
everybody who gets to 2 million in SaaS these days has offers from investors to take it, and there's a decision to go the VC funded route or
Mm-hmm.
stay off of it here. You succeeded in this transition and this transaction, but not everybody does in the VC world. How did you think about playing the VC game? Did you just know you needed to get more money and grow faster, or how did you know it was a good bet?
I saw the way the Salesforce ecosystem operated, and it really was
Yeah.
about distribution and reach. And you need money for that. It's a very expensive ecosystem to
Mm.
operate back then. It's a very
Okay.
expensive ecosystem to operate in now. And if we really wanted to get the growth that we wanted and accomplish the goals that we needed the capital. So the
Okay.
decision was
You
really,
raised some capital from Lighter along the way,
we did,
multiple, let's say, revenue based
mhm.
financing here. So how did that help you understand what the potential was
It
for raising more
validated
money?
when we took money from Lighter, we were doing like 650,000 recurring. And then we took over $1 million. We took exactly $1 million in revenue loans. And that
Right.
$1 million in revenue loans was how we went from 600K in recurring to 2.2 million recurring in about 13 months.
So without any selling any equity, you had had to pay that back with a little premium. It's a little bit like debt. You were able to prove that you could throw money at it, get to a
Right.
higher revenue, therefore a higher valuation. Is that what was it? A kind of a spreadsheet kind of decision like that, or
It
did
was
you feel you were in a race? Yeah,
the
yeah.
decision was Lighter was literally the only people who would give us capital at that point, period, end of story, full stop. So it was my only choice. And to this day, I'm
Yeah,
appreciative to the opportunity they
yeah.
afforded me by giving me a revenue loan when literally no one else would give us money. Not a traditional
Mm,
bank, not a VC, not anybody. Yeah. So
yeah.
it really was, the decision to take it wasn't a spreadsheet exercise. The decision to take it was, if you
Mm,
want to do this strategy, then the cost of playing is going to be, you got to take this revenue loan and just do this. So we did. So we took it. We
yeah,
proved the model.
yeah,
Look, in SaaS, maybe the numbers are different now, but I always believed it was, $1 million in SaaS revenue just says you might have something. 10 million in
yeah.
SaaS revenue is product market fit. 20
Hmm.
million in SaaS revenue says you have the ability to scale. 50 is scale, and 100 million, at least back in the days, you go public or you sell to a PE firm.
Yep.
And those are the
Yeah.
metrics. And we blew through that first million metric first, saying, okay, we probably have something that need to put rocket fuel. The other thing the Lighter
Yeah.
capital money enabled was us to figure out our go to market motion. We figured out how to work these Salesforce events called World Tours, how to build brand in the
Yeah.
ecosystem, what mattered to the sales folks at Salesforce. And so that million sort of didn't just validate the product, it validated our go-to-market motion.
Yeah.
And then in
Yeah.
December of 2014, when we raised, it was $7.5 million. At that point, it was on a $28 million pre. We were doing
Mm-hmm.
$2.2 million in revenue. We took all that
Mm-hmm.
money and we basically poured it into sales and marketing motion. We built a sales team. We did every
Mm-hmm.
single world tour. We did marketing. But the marketing was really, it wasn't to the customers, it was to these Salesforce sales reps, is who we marketed to. So
Ah.
they understood the value proposition, how we could drive more revenue and therefore more commission checks for them. And we burned it all up in a year. So we raised our B round 13 months later in January. So in January 2016, which was 13 months after we raised our A round. So we blew through 7.5 million plus. We even went into some debt in
Yeah.
13 months. However, when we closed our Series B 13 months later, we were doing 8.8 million in revenue. So we went from 2.2 to 8.8
Wow.
in 13 months.
Wow. That's
So
rocket for rocket fuel.
it was rocket fuel for
Yeah.
rockets. And that again is
Yeah.
the best reason to take VC money. It's the best way to spend VC money. If, obviously at that point we weren't quite 10 million, but obviously we were going to get there. So we had gotten product market fit and all we were doing was pour this much capital into it, get this much revenue out of it. And so then the math becomes pretty simple when you go for your next round. It's, now it's a spreadsheet exercise, right? Like saying, hey,
Yeah.
this many
And VCs
reps.
understand that. So they weren't understanding Salesforce in the beginning. Even in 2011, 12, VCs were not very familiar with
They
SaaS
were getting there by
yet.
2015, 16. One of
Yeah.
the reasons, the big drivers was in 2015. I don't know if you remember this, but if you go back to the history of Salesforce bought 14 companies in 2015.
Yeah.
They bought all
Yeah.
the stuff that would eventually became their AI, Einstein platform. They were buying
Yeah.
everything, and I think that woke up to the VC community the fact that Salesforce was a strategic exit partner. And then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
everybody wanted to put money into Salesforce companies. Right? Salesforce.
Interesting.
Imagine how that
Yeah, but
works.
you could see the dotted line.
Mm-hmm.
So was raising VC funding, which is sometimes an exercise in futility. You don't fit their model. You're not saying the words. It's not in that template and so forth. But you went from not being VC fundable to fitting the template. Salesforce is buying. We have this growth math. Put money in, get growth valuation out, and you had an effective go-to-market inside the Salesforce ecosystem and inside Salesforce. So you didn't have to drop flyers from the sky very expensively as well. So you went to being a cool kid for VC funding. Graycroft and others funded you along the way.
They did. Graycroft and other well-known VCs funded us along the way. Salesforce put a ton of capital into us. They were,
Okay.
by the time we exited Salesforce, and again, don't think of the era now, think of the era then, but they had put,
Yeah.
$24 million into us, which is a pretty good indicator that they would be an exit partner at one day. But they put about 24 million into us over 3 rounds
So
actually.
for practical founders out there that are in ecosystems or the Salesforce ecosystem and see Salesforce as a potential exit partner, is that part of the process? The Salesforce loves it. They can easily recommend. Customers are happy. There's a great, business ROI for Salesforce. But is that part of the process to have Salesforce Ventures invest in you, as a way to get inside the business and sell someday to Salesforce?
I don't think it's really the case anymore.
Yeah.
Salesforce, I mean, their investment group is amazing. They put money into almost everything. So
Yeah.
nowadays, I think it
Yeah.
operates a little bit more like a traditional, almost VC
Okay.
fund. They certainly invest in
Mhm.
a lot of things. They buy companies they've never put a penny into, and they
Yeah.
buy companies like us. Now, I think the era is different. I think we were probably one of the last small acquisitions for Salesforce. If you look at it, and everything since then has been massive acquisitions, whether it was
Massive.
Tableau, Slack. More recently, it was just announced today they bought Own Backup or now Own for
Yeah.
$1.9 billion. I think when you get to
Yeah.
the size that Salesforce now is, which is 35 billion in revenue, they have
Yeah.
to move the needle. And to do that, they're
Yeah.
acquiring very, very, very large companies to make that
Yeah.
happen. So
Yeah. So you're saying a $250 million acquisition, 20 million in revenue is too small for Salesforce these days. He's
That's my
effectively.
personal feeling when I talk to
Yeah. Yeah.
founders and they're like,
Yeah.
we've built initially on the platform, or this is a strategy. I ask them, well, what's your intended exit? And if they eventually tell me, hey, I want to sell to Salesforce, I say, look, that's a great aspiration. It's certainly possible, but that's not fitting the profile of what Salesforce does these days in terms of what they
Right.
acquire and how they acquire. The exception might be some sort of piece of AI technology, but the truth
Yeah.
is, I think they're targeting things that can move the needle. And so they have to buy
Yeah.
public companies or near public companies when they acquire. Because, for a large company has, and this is something I learned on the inside there's a very large integration cost. And so it's got to be, the juice has to be worth the
Oh,
squeeze,
yes.
right? As the expression
Yep.
goes. And so there's a
Hmm.
there's a very large integration cost when they buy a company. And it costs them almost as much to integrate a company, say, like MapAnything, as it does a Tableau. The difference being, a Tableau is doing something
Uh,
like $1 billion in revenue, and we were doing, 25 million in revenue. It's the same
hmm.
motions, it's the same steps you have to go through, it's the same sales integration, it's the same boom, 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 boom. And so you really have to understand that if you're going to attempt to call a shot like that. I don't think,
Is it?
I think it's much more difficult for if you're trying to design around to exit to a true platform play these days. I think just like all platform plays, it gets to a point where they're either buying, like I said, public companies or near public companies with massive amounts of revenue, or simply straight up IP acquisitions, call them acquihires.
Yeah.
But
Huh?
that's not going to be the profile of most companies building on that platform these days. And I'm not disparaging it. My experience with Salesforce was fantastic. The people at Salesforce were fantastic. It afforded me huge opportunities. Obviously, I'm blessed to have an outcome.
Yeah.
And so I don't want you to think that I'm speaking negatively about that. I'm not. I'm just trying to, since this is supposed to be advice to startups, I'm trying to give some very practical advice
Yeah.
to
I appreciate that.
the founders of those companies as they think about and they design their exit, right? And in many cases, you want to try to design your exit.
That's right. So appreciate that on the exit here. Let's go back to that growth journey. Was the software Map Anything? Let's just stop
Mm-hmm.
and ask, what is Map Anything? See your contacts on a map is quite simple there. But
Not real
what
high
was it
value.
really?
So
To
when
yeah,
we sold
yeah.
to Salesforce, it was field sales, field service, route schedule optimization. And that's what really
Okay.
was the power of the platform. We built the world's first route and schedule optimization engine in 25 years. After we raised the Series B, we built out a OR science team, and we built one from scratch. People thought we were crazy, and the goal was to build the fastest, most capable general purpose field sales, field service optimization engine in the world. And which started out as a marketing slogan. And funny enough, by the time Salesforce had acquired us, we had built the world's fastest, most capable route and schedule optimization. And so we weren't just a revenue acquisition for Salesforce, we were a piece of IP as well. And that engine that we built
Ah,
is now what's underneath their field service lightning product. And the core
okay.
application is now called Salesforce Maps there.
Yeah. So and map. So what are the various use cases there? Is it predominantly of
Ter-
all the ways you could view data on a map and use it, but the route scheduling and optimization problem for field sales and service turned out to be the big one. Is that what it is, or are there
Territory, I think about
a stack of use cases? Yeah.
this is where my sales reps are. How do I break up fair and equitable territories? How do we
Right.
efficiently see all the customers in the field? If I'm a HVAC service company, we have 30 technicians and 300 tickets, and this is the inventory on this truck, and these are the windows by which someone has to visit those customers, and these
Hmm.
customers need Spanish speakers, and these customers need certified technicians. Build my schedule for the week. Tell me who's going where and how. So there was real ROI on
Right.
it. It wasn't just,
Yeah.
it started off as pretty pins on a map, which is great, but it
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
have a lot of value. And it morphed
Yeah.
into actual logistics management or field sales, field service operations, which of course is pretty high
Yeah.
ROI.
Right. And at that optimization game, you put it on route scheduling and so forth. There's a map involved, a spatial GPS dynamic inside that optimization
There is.
that has to go through. Yeah,
That
that's
optimization
amazing.
has to work in the real world where there's traffic patterns and traffic history and, that sort of thing.
Right. And that was all, let's say, algorithm based
Yes.
in your optimization, multiple variables and what's the best route and, planning all that. Was it machine learning, which we would now call AI and any of that magic there? Or was it just lots of data, lots of math and lots of, improved ROI?
Well, I mean, that type of optimization was mostly just efficient heuristics and,
Yeah.
of course, the road network incorporated into it. We created some really novel IP. We got a couple patents on it that, of course, belong to Salesforce now.
Okay.
In terms of the road network or the node, if you will. But it
Mm-hmm.
really wasn't machine learning or AI as you would understand it today. There wasn't really methods like the
Yeah.
algorithms weren't self-healing, self-learning like some of the stuff that we now do
Mm-hmm.
at Fast Break. It wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
the system wasn't learning from the user to say this is the best way to do it. It wasn't like learning patterns to say, obviously, if the user was doing things a certain way, even though the optimization said something else, it wasn't picking up the nuance of that. That's some of the stuff that we
Yeah.
now do
Yeah.
at Fast Break is we can basically teach our algorithm the intuition of the scheduler by, machine learning methods. So that was optimization without ML
Wow.
or AI. We now do optimization with ML and AI here.
So, John, are you a technical founder? As maybe an engineer? Are you a sales business founder? I know you had a CTO
I did.
for
Yes,
MapAnything, Ben
correct.
Brantley, but maybe you speak both languages, the sales and the technology.
Whatever I need to be. Now, my background is I'm actually a mechanical engineer by degree. So the engineering services
Yeah.
firm, for most of the time I was there, I was still doing services. So I am a highly technical founder. Sales software is a new space, but there was a time when I didn't know how to code, but I know enough to understand what's going on, which is super helpful. So I had a great CTO co-founder in Ben, and we were able to communicate. He was able to
Hmm.
express things at a technical level. I think my best skill, though, is I would say would be my sales skills more than anything. I learned that during the dot-com era before I started my first business. I mean, if you're a founder, look, if you're a founder, especially for a tech company, your job is selling, selling, and selling. You're either selling the vision of your company to investors to bring in money. You're either selling your product and your vision to the customers to generate revenue, or you're selling yourself and the company to prospective employees, i.e., recruiting. And that's really what your
Yeah.
job is as a CEO. It's recruiting, it's selling business, and it's raising money. And as I say, selling, selling, and selling. And I think as a skill set, I'm pretty good at those things, and that's why I've been able to, build the companies I've built, or even the companies I've been involved in. I've been able to help grow, and this one here at Fast Break, why we've had such large amounts of early success in the last 2 years.
This week's podcast is sponsored by my friends at Cypress Growth Capital. My favorite milestone for practical SaaS founders is after you've survived the first few crazy years and you have some repeatable sales and a growing team and perhaps a little profit showing up. You know you could grow faster with a little outside capital, but the thought of raising money from VCs would change your whole game. And we know VC funding is the most expensive growth capital on the planet. That's why so many practical SaaS founders I know have partnered with Cypress Growth Capital when they hit that predictable growth inflection point. For 15 years, Cypress has provided non-dilutive growth funding to bootstrapped SaaS founders, including many of the successful founders I've had on this podcast. They love practical founders. Cypress provides enough patient capital for you to invest in your growth without giving up any of your precious equity or having to guarantee a loan personally. Their investment team has people like you who have grown and sold successful software and technology companies, and their operational and entrepreneurial experience helps them give you strategic guidance at those key inflection points in your business. So go to cypressgrowthcapital.com/practical and learn more, and contact Cliff Santel at Cypress to see if there's a fit. Now back to our podcast. So you grew very fast, and you added funding and grew faster, right? So you had a scalable sales motion. It wasn't just founder selling for so long, and you kind of had the playbooks and worked inside Salesforce, which gave you some leverage. Was it a sales driven motion? You talk about building brand. Did salespeople find their own leads with an outbound kind of motion, or was it the marketing game to create interest, and then salespeople helped close?
We played the brand game, which means we went to every single Salesforce World Tour and Dreamforce event, and we had massive presences. We really over-indexed and invested on that.
Yeah,
and inside the Salesforce ecosystem, MapAnything was a very well-known brand, and that was important so that the sales reps at Salesforce, when they even heard something that was similar, they would reach out to our reps. So that was number one. Number two, we built out an enterprise sales team to go after the biggest accounts and partner in with the reps to get the doors at those enterprise accounts. And number three, we did do the whole SDR, BDR, outbound sales motion.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
We did it all.
You did them all here. What was the average revenue per customer per year? ACV?
Man, I don't remember that at this point. I mean, it was
like 20,000 a year or 100,000. Was this kind of junior enterprise or very small? $1,000 a month.
By the time we sold to Salesforce, we were doing multi-year 7-figure enterprise deals, and we were still doing minimum size deals, which were 10 seats. I think that was $3,500. So, and everything in between. And obviously, there's a lot more of those than there are of the monster size enterprise deals.
And you grew fast selling. Was there a major implementation hurdle to get over that required that good old services implementation, customization, data scrubbing?
It was
I don't know, all that, or
we were a native built app. You installed it was up and running, so you can install MapAnything in about an hour and configure it and configure use cases. But that's never the issue. It's always about adoption. And so getting the reps and the service peoples to adopt it, it was always it's the biggest challenge for Salesforce in this day and age. People buy massive numbers of licenses to Salesforce, and getting the sales reps to adopt it. That was always our challenge. So our services were really about training and building adoption use cases and videos. It wasn't about like custom deployment. There was no real services component to it. That actually hurt us, by the way, with the integrators.
Yeah.
Because we would like an extend.
Yeah, they want to recommend, so they get the services.
They would often look at what we did and how fast it was, and then they would recommend, "Hey, give us $3 million, and we'll build a shittier version of MapAnything." that was fun. It was always ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, that's a great opportunity to sell, and if you've been doing this long enough, you remember that there wasn't mapping software for Salesforce in the beginning, and if you wanted it, you had to have somebody build it, like like somebody did. So you were building, and if you go back long enough, it was internal IT departments trying to build software. So that old homegrown or custom build software was your competition, and you could sell against that quite quickly here. You ran that as CEO. By the time you sold, did you have a full executive leadership team, VPs of everything, and 220 employees, and a layer down of management and frontline employees? You had that whole scaled up internal organization.
We had the CTO, the CPO, the CFO, general counsel. So we had it right down the line. Chief customer officer. I had, I think, 11 reports by the time it was done.
Yeah. So, John, seems like a pretty straight line where you had this opportunity, decided to focus on it, and the more you invested in your product and sales, the faster it grew. You raised funding, and that worked out for you. But that's a pretty crazy journey. What was the hardest part for you and your co-founder, Ben, along the way that was the most challenging for you in this journey?
Especially in the tech space, it's always people. As the company begins to grow, maintaining culture becomes very, very challenging. By the time you get to 100 people, the 101st person is it's just a job at that point, versus like the scrappy startup. And I think that's probably one of the bigger challenges. And then, bringing the right leadership, and it's hard because you want people to grow into roles, but one of the things you figure out is that as a startup grows into something that's not a startup. And I would say by the time we sold, we weren't a startup anymore. We
Yep.
were an actual business. People have
Right.
ceilings,
Mhm.
and it's one of the harder things it is for
Ah,
a day one CEO founder who's grown a business to a certain size, realizing that that were with you for a long time, they've hit their ceiling, and you either have to bring in someone over them or part ways with them because they just can't be there for the next leg of the journey. I think that's challenging for
yeah.
a CEO at that point and that level.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and at that point, you were still growing like 100% a year,
Well,
something like
we
that.
were
Or,
the growth slowed down a
it's,
little bit. I mean, we went from 8.8 to about 15.
yeah.
We went 8.8 to about 15, and then from 15, I think we ended that year at 23. So it really, that's the other thing most you got to
Yeah.
realize too, is once you get to a certain scale size, it's really hard to keep doing that double thing. They say that the top tier companies
Yeah.
do triple, triple, double, double, but man, is it hard to keep doing
Yeah.
that.
Man, is it hard? It gets bigger, big number, right? And those years, all of a sudden, you have to add more new revenue than you did the first 8 years of your business or something
It
like
gets
that. It's
challenging.
really
You have to
amazing.
put a lot more rocket fuel in. And what you find actually is those are not efficient dollars. Those really aren't. It's before where you put $1 in, you might get $3 in revenue. As you get bigger and bigger and you try to hit that growth, it's like now you put a
Uh-huh.
dollar in, you might be getting $1.10 back or 80 cents back even. And that
As a founder.
no, just looking at the
Yeah.
sales motion, right? So $1 spent on
I
sales and
see. Right.
marketing
Okay.
produces how many dollars in revenue? And so what you find out as you get bigger and
Right.
bigger, and you've gotten all the low hanging fruit, and you have to figure out new products and go to market motion.
Hmm.
You know, Initially you put $1 in, you're getting four back, right? Or then it's $1 in, you're getting three, and then two, and
Hmm.
then one, and then by the way, at some point you might be putting $1 invested in, and you're getting 80 cents back, but you hope that the lifetime value is worth more than that, and so it's worth doing. So as the company
Hmm.
begins to grow, SaaS companies have different SaaS company challenges.
Yeah, that's right. Well, in the old days, we used to call it in the fast growth software, Pony Express management. You get a horse that gets you from here to there,
Mm-hmm.
and then you switch horses, right? But you can do that with leaders and you can grow people, and there's amazing career opportunities. How did you do that as a CEO? Did you feel challenged because you were replacing some leaders along the way, but you weren't replacing yourself? You had to grow
I did.
yourself.
I had good mentors, which is important. You need to have really good business mentors. And I had ones that, I like, even one of the VCs early on became, to this day, a really good friend and mentor. And he helped me understand the VC
Hmm.
mindset and how to position for really big growth rounds and fundraising rounds. I had excellent business mentors and other startups that I learned from. I try to pay that back by mentoring
Yeah.
other startup founders these days when I can, when I have
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's you definitely have to grow, and you have to grow because the challenges you hit at each phase are different, right? The challenges early on is, are we going to be able to meet
Hmm.
payroll? And you may have, depending on how you're burning, you might be
Hmm.
having that challenge the whole time. It later becomes, okay, how do we really go to product market fit? And then, what do we need to support that? When you start realizing like this is like a legit business, is the software, if you're a technology company, actually designed for scale? One of the big mistakes we made with
Yeah.
MapAnything, and I regret to this day,
Mm.
was our innovation slowed way down because we never fathomed the level of success that we were actually going to obtain, and then refactoring and building the
Oh,
software for actual scale. It was like
right.
changing the tire on a car while the car was doing
Yeah.
60. So from that point forward,
Yeah.
one of the advices I give to first time founders is, look, as you design your technology, first of all, I hate the concept of MVP, minimally viable product. I think that has destroyed more
Hmm.
companies, and I think it's a terrible philosophy, and I can get into it with product managers every day. That is a marketing philosophy to try to understand if there's a business there. But if you've got the conviction there's a business there, you design that
Yeah.
product that is going to be wildly successful. And that will, doing that early on when there is no technical debt versus later, it may keep you from spending 10
Mm.
times as much later. And really where it kills you is pace of innovation. and we had to refactor MapAnything at
Right.
an inflection point where it was brutal, where our innovation slowed to almost nothing for a year.
Yeah.
I was still paying a very,
Yeah. To rebuild the
like,
platform.
when
Yeah.
we were selling a couple seats at the time, I never imagined one day we'd have, over 100,000 users on it. So it's a different scenario where you're designing to build products. So like, even with this, with FastBreak, with what we're doing, not just at the pro level, we're about to enter the youth marketplace. From day one, we are architecting this product to assume that one day we're going to have 1 million simultaneous users on it. Assume success.
Yeah.
It'll save you aggravation and stress later.
Yeah. Yeah, for practical founders who've never been through those journeys, you don't realize at about 20 million how slow the wait of so many employees who are not fanatic early stage folks, and that you're big enough to have built the software 2 generations ago in technology, right before all this cool stuff happened, and it gets a little harder. That's the advantage of
Move
startups.
fast.
You can move fast when big companies move slow. So, speaking about big companies here, did Salesforce reach out to you and say, "Hey, let's talk"? Or did you shop the company, or how did you instigate the Salesforce acquisition that was successful for you?
Ultimately, they instigated it, but we had such tight alignment. They invested in our A round, they invested in our B
Mm,
round, and when they invested in our B
yeah.
round, Salesforce joined the board. Mike Rosenbaum, he's now the
Okay, they were on
he,
the
he was
board.
now the
Right. So here
he's
we
now the
go.
CEO
Right.
of
Yeah.
Guidewire, but at the time he ran CRM products, basically
Hmm.
Sales Cloud and Service Cloud and Force.com. So he was a big
Yeah.
advocate. He
Yeah.
understood the technology we're building, where it was needed inside, and that certainly helped. So it got to a point where it was sort of, you know, uh, almost a predetermined outcome at some point, which sort of felt good, but at the same time,
Mm.
you're on the timetable of the strategic who's going to pick you up.
And are you on their valuation spreadsheet as well? Do they call the
What
shot?
do you mean by that?
Having your acquirer on the board as an investor, how did you negotiate
Well,
price?
there was a negotiation. I mean, look, they made a very fair offer for where we were at the stage. They had participated in the C round. It was a little weird
Yeah.
because we just raised our Series C,
Hmm.
and then we literally, well,
Oh, sorry
look,
to hear that.
it is what it is. You're on the timing of the strategic when you
Hmm.
go down this path, and so I understood
Hmm.
it. I mean, we had closed our Series C
Yeah.
on December 24th, and I was approached at a board meeting, December 11th. So there was
Mm.
we just raised capital. We
Yeah.
raised a total of $81 million of venture capital. And by the time we closed, we still had
Hmm.
tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars. So it is what it is. No one's
Yeah.
crying for me. It's all good.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Yeah. And so this is the bigger pie game. You grew faster. You were diluted by VC funding, so you didn't own all the company, and you and your co-founder and employees owned a minority, I guess, probably at the end or something like that. Did it work out for you, the math of we could have grown this organically, bootstrapped it, and kept our equity and sold it? Was the math better for you and Ben to have grown fast and had a smaller piece
The
of a bigger
math
pie,
worked
as they
out
say?
fantastic. There's no look.
Hey, great.
You get into this conversation a lot of times about delusion and all that stuff, and early on, you don't want to take too much delusion.
Yeah.
But
Uh-huh.
I am a bigger pie theory type of guy. Give me zero
Yeah.
zero
Okay.
zero 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 1% of Amazon versus 100% of some startup, right? Any day of the week. It's X times Y equals
Yeah.
Z, and what most founders need to
Yeah.
understand is the only number they get to spend is the Z number. The rest doesn't matter, right?
Yeah. That's right. And so, what would you say to founders of there's the bigger pie theory you're in favor of about how to wisely take VC funding? When should you
You
consider it,
should
and when should
consider
you
it when you
not?
know exactly how you're going to spend it. I see a lot of times people raise, and other than I got a burn rate that I got to
Mm.
cover, they don't really understand how they're going to spend it
Hmm.
and how that's going to
Yeah.
create value. So if you don't, I've done a lot of investment. I had a 3-year non-compete. I sat out my non-compete, and in that time, I did a lot of investment myself. And I
Right.
would sit down with startups.
Yeah.
I did a lot of seed investment, like probably in like 30 deals. And
Yeah.
when I sit across the table from a founder, and they said, I asked them, how are you going to spend the money? They're like, we're going to build a team. I said, great. Tell me about the first 5 hires that you're making. And if they didn't know who they were going to hire, then I would question whether or not they really understood their business or they really understood how they're going to spend their money. Right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that goes back to what a CEO should always be doing. You're always, I tell people all the time, you're always recruiting. You're not always be hiring, but you're 100% of the time always recruiting. Even, this week, I talked to 2 candidates. I'm not sure when we're going to hire them or if we'll hire them, but you're always recruiting and building your bench strength. So that's a little piece of advice to the founders who will maybe listen to this.
Yeah, appreciate that.
And then the other thing too is, if you're going to say, okay, we want to build out our sales and marketing, go to, market motion, same thing. Like, tell me exactly in the next 6 months who and what you're spending that capital on. So that's the right time to take the money, is when you know exactly how you're going to spend it, and then you have your theory, and maybe hopefully you've proven out a little bit. You've got your theory or some proof that this is going to be the impact of that capital. You only want to take jet fuel if you've got a jet to put it in. It doesn't do you any good if you take jet fuel and you've got a Ford Pinto, for those who are old enough on this thing to remember what a Ford Pinto is.
Yeah.
I'm dating myself, by the way. You guys should.
Yeah, the ones that blew up the gas tank back in the day. So, great, appreciate that. So, you were acquired by a big strategic partner that you were, were really closely aligned with and had on your board and so forth. Yeah. Salesforce was by then a massive company, but they do a lot of acquisitions, and they have some of the best, let's say, structuring of their product marketing, their products. It was going to become Salesforce Maps, and there's a whole bunch of structure, like you said there. What did you learn about acquiring a sizable company into a much more, into a massive company that you didn't know before being on the outside of Salesforce?
I think one of the things you learn is things move a lot slower, of course. I think once a company gets bigger and bigger, running a small company, you're basically you're a benign dictator, right? It's a benign dictatorship. But you get to a large company, and corporate America is such that it's much more consensus driven than it is that model. I think the one exception might, in fact, be Elon Musk and the way he runs his companies. Right. To his credit, by the way, look what he's built in running that model. Right.
Yeah.
So that was it's definitely a culture shock and shift. Nothing but positive things. Though the Salesforce folks are great. It was a great outcome. It was a great outcome for them as well. The product is done well inside the 4 walls of Salesforce. And then it's a different thing. Like being really leading a 220 person company roughly versus being part of a 75,000 person company. That's like working for the government at that point. 75,000 people, big.
Wow. And so did your team transition okay? I know you spent maybe 6 months there before you moved on. Did your team integrate into,
I think so.
The new organization, their new silos, all that kind of stuff, and everything shifted pretty quickly?
They've all had or are having great careers there. As you would expect, a lot of my C-suite that was there moved on. My co-founder, Ben Brantley, most recently left after about 5 years. So he's just recently is moving on to bigger and better things. But the rest of my team, there's a good portion of my team that came with me and are still there, probably about 40% of the people. So that's a good sign. That's a good acquisition for Salesforce. They pick up great people.
That's a good sign.
And again, I think the higher level they were, the more likely it was they would move on. So there's no one that was in my C-suite that is still at Salesforce. They stayed anywhere from 30 days and the shortest to 5 years would be the longest, or almost 5 years, just under 5 years, like 4.5 years. That was bad. And the rest sort of dipped out at various times along there, and whatever was important to them for their careers. And then a lot of people that were with me at MapAnything and are now in leadership roles there. I'm pretty proud of that. Some of them are doing amazing things there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So, how did your VCs do? Was
They all
this a
made
big
money.
thumbs up, and you were made friends of the VCs?
I
You're a
don't
made
think
man
the
now,
C investors,
and did they all win the prize they
the
were
A and B
expecting?
investors certainly did. The C investors,
Yeah,
they still made about 35%, which is not what VCs get in there to do. But
yeah,
their money went on their money went in
yeah,
on November 24th, and they got their money back on May 30th. So for 6 months, making a 30%, 35%
yeah.
coupon is, it's not terrible, but it is not the VC model. So they weren't necessarily thrilled with that, the C investors.
Yes,
But
right,
the good news is on
right.
my cap table for the C investors, it was mostly people that had been in my A and B. So everybody from the A and B, the A investors
Ah,
did really, really good. Keep in mind that if you think about it, we took our initial round of VC capital. It was December 14th, 2014, I believe, was our A round. And we
hmm
had basically an offer for the company. Yeah.
5 years later.
So they
Yeah,
weren't, they weren't in that thing that long for the money, for the money they made. So they,
yeah.
look, the VCs made money, the employees and made money. Certainly myself and my co-founder, we made money. So it was a fantastic outcome for all involved. And the employees, even the later employees, they got great jobs at a fantastic company that they were able to continue their careers. Everyone in my
hmm
company had an equity position. It might have been a really, really small equity position, right?
hmm
Some people got a toaster and some people got a
Yeah,
house, right? So it all depends on when you join Map Anything but
yeah.
that's the game,
No,
right?
that's the game. That's right. Yeah,
The people that were there, sub
yeah.
50
That's great.
employees, they took a lot of risk and they enjoyed the rewards.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on a successful journey, and that's one way to do it for practical founders: is services to software to bootstrap to a little debt to
It's,
prove it up and raise VC funding, and you
it
won that
seems
game.
like a
So
lifetime ago at this
congratulations to
point.
you on that. Yeah.
Over 5 years, so that's like a
Yes.
lifetime in tech at this point.
How did it feel after you know spent your last day and walked out and you had money in your bank account and didn't have a team anymore and it had transitioned. How did that feel when you finally took a breath?
A little strange, truthfully. I've been working
Mm,
since I was 12. My first job was shoveling stalls at a
hmm
horse farm. And so it was a little weird.
Yeah,
And you
yeah.
all of a sudden, when you have realized that you never have to work again if you don't want to, you realize, damn, I need to work and I have to be doing something. Like it's not, building something is not what it's not what
Building.
I do. It's who I
Yeah,
am. And I did have a non compete, so I
yeah.
did sort of have to wait out. In that period of time, what I did was I invested in a bunch of companies. I got involved in real estate. I built a real estate portfolio. I helped out a couple companies from in a biz dev role, ones that I invested in earlier, just to sort of
hmm
keep the something to do and keep
hmm
help protect the investments I made in them. So I went and I worked for a couple portfolio companies I invested in until that point at which we were, like I said, I was done with my non compete, 36 months in, and started a new company with two former employees that I had recruited into MapAnything. We sat down and said, this is something that we want to do. And, we formed FastBreak.
So tell us about Fast Break here, your third adventure,
Third
your
adventure, yes.
entrepreneurial
So
adventure.
FastBreak is a SaaS cloud platform for sports leagues to create their schedules in a nutshell. So SaaS, software as a service. This is
hmm
what I would say. It's a thesis that I'm following, which is micro vertical. I think the big platform plays are a little too
hmm
onerous these days and too much capital intensive. But there's plenty of
hmm
niches or micro
hmm
niches. And my two co-founders, who are the
hmm
technical geniuses on this one, they have specialized skill set in this particular area, and we've built a SaaS cloud platform. We launched the generally available product, the GA product, May 2023. So not that long ago for the GA product, but in that time,
hmm
we have the NBA, the NHL, the AHL. We have the Big East, the SEC. We have Major League Soccer. This is probably airing after Monday, I'm guessing. When is this airing, Greg?
A couple weeks. Yeah.
Perfect. So we just acquired the only competitor in the space who's really capable. So now we have
Oh,
the
wow.
NFL and Major League Baseball as well. So we have all
Yeah.
5 professional sports leagues in the United States who are on the platform or soon will be, which is pretty great. We have a couple tier 1 leagues in Europe. And this is all part of an overall technology and brand strategy at the professional college level as we push into youth sports is the next big push.
So that scheduling problem, setting the schedule for sports leagues, that's an optimization problem,
Correct.
which is look at all the
Correct.
factors of maybe weather. We're going to go, down south there, at the right time of the year, based on other things, making sure the right teams play the right
The
competitors in
NBA,
the right order.
well, the matchups are predetermined, but
Okay.
the schedule there's about 1,000 rules or parameters that go into this defining an NBA schedule. No
Right.
one really thinks about it. Now we provide the software that lets the leagues define those parameters and play with it and come to the best possible schedule. But you have 30 teams in the NBA, for example. They have 30 sets of arena availabilities. Like I want, right? And there's a concert this night. We can't do that night. We have to be home for this night. We're retiring a jersey. So they have availability and they have requests. Then the NBA has the customers to consider. Their customers are their media rights partners. They have 3 of those. ESPN wants the Lakers so many times, or the Warriors so many times, or the Knicks so many times, and they want them this type of spread. You have rest imbalance rules, minimize 4 and 5, 7 and 13s. It goes on and on. And
Yeah.
what our system does,
You
it
can't
allows
travel for 7 games in a row, that kind of thing. All
home
that.
away patterns and travel patterns and rest patterns and everything you could possibly think of. And our system, what it does is it allows a league to put in all these competing factors. And, we also have machine learning that allows the algorithms to start understanding what's important to the user that's the intuition of this is a good road trip, this is a bad road trip. And our solver goes and takes all that data and we do as good a job as possible meeting all that criteria. And it's a negative penalty scoring system. And it goes through in cycles and produces potential schedules. And the leagues look at them. They have the ability to manually clean some things up and they publish a schedule.
Great.
That's it.
Yeah. And it's not something you can do with an Excel spreadsheet. There's the solver optimization tool that's been out there for years that helps people do this. But this is like a vertical market for sports scheduling version of that old optimization solver problem.
Well, yes, in the simplest language, correct, right?
Awesome. So, can you say about the revenues and employees so far? I know you raised a little funding here too. So
we did. So we raised a priced round in early April. That was we have strategics in that, including Greg Croft and the NBA, and a bunch of individuals who are important in the world of sports and sports media. And then more recently, we did another a real quick round in July to fund the acquisitions that we're going through now. So it was sort of a mini roll-up play, if you will. We'll end the year north of $4.5 million in recurring revenue.
There you go.
So the company
just over a year and a half in. Yeah, your second year of revenue.
Well, yes. So second year of revenue. So we launched the company July 7th this past year would have been 2 years. So we're about 26 months in. But we didn't launch the software until May of 2023. So we're about, 15 months in on that, or so, 18
great.
months, maybe.
Yeah.
15.
And what is your vision for this? Looks like, there's sports leagues all over the world, and maybe you focus on the professional sports leagues, and they're all over, but it's every sports league that you're thinking about.
So professional, we segment the market into 2 pieces. We have professional, and I include collegiate in there as well. You might as well be professional at this point. There's, in that regard, you're looking at about 100 professional sports leagues worldwide with revenues over $10 million. It's a
Right.
pretty limited marketplace. With the acquisition that we just picked up in our own customer base, we already have
Yep.
about 35 of those 100. So we already have a pretty
Hmm.
dominant position. We're
Yeah.
leveraging that technology and that brand as we go down to attack the youth sports marketplace, which, by the
Ah,
way, Americans spend $35 to $38 billion a year. That's billion
huge.
on youth sports. That's
Hmm.
growing, according to both Aspen and Wintergreen Research, to 85 billion by 2035.
Wow.
We're entering that marketplace this month of September, and we're bringing the technology and our brand from the pro level to the youth level, and we see very large potential here.
And you have investors, so that means someday
Mm-hmm.
you'll sell the company. Do you imagine this, fast growth game and eventually sell the company, build a big, valuable company and sell it to pay back those investors?
I imagine that we will build a strong, sustainable, fast growing business, which will then lead to us having several monetization options for the
Hmm.
investors. But
Okay, great.
you never focus on the exit, you focus on building a strong, sustainable business first. That opens
Yeah,
up your monetization options.
awesome. Well, congratulations on your third venture here, Builders
Thank you.
Build, as we say. I'm still waiting to hear from a founder who said, I officially retired. I don't need to do any of this anymore. We just love building here and love helping others build as we do.
Mm-hmm.
John, I appreciate you sharing your story of
You're welcome.
MapAnything and now your new Fast Break and how you got there and how you actually succeeded playing the VC funding game, which is totally possible. It's just not likely, out there these days. John, what advice do you have most often for SaaS founders that are trying to get on the field and grow their business, whether they're VC funded or not? What's the most common advice you have for those founders that you can share?
You know, I try to tell. It really obviously it's the context of the question. Are they asking about
Yeah,
building the team? Are they asking about product market fit? It really is contextual to
yeah,
what
yeah.
they're asking advice on.
Hmm.
So really boiling it down to one piece of advice is challenging. I
Hmm.
will tell those founders more often than not that really you need to focus on sales and distribution. As a CEO of a startup in tech space SaaS, the only thing that really matters is revenue growth.
Hmm.
Technology is technology, and if it's unique IP right now, it won't be soon enough. So you
Yeah.
really need to figure out your go-to-market motion, and that's the single most important thing. Look,
Awesome.
revenue cures all ills. It doesn't matter what's going on in the company, as long as revenue is growing. It's not a problem. It's not real problems.
Yeah, right. Awesome. So it isn't funding cures all ills; it's revenue cures all ills, and that's the real proof in the
Funding
pudding
creates
there.
its own headaches, right? That
Yeah,
creates its own problems and challenges.
yeah, totally.
It's all about revenue growth more than
Yeah,
anything.
appreciate that, John. Thanks for being on the Practical
You're
Founders
welcome.
podcast.
You're welcome.
Thanks for watching this week's founder interview on the Practical Founders podcast. Be sure to hit like and then subscribe to my Practical Founders YouTube channel to keep up with my weekly videos for serious software founders who are building valuable companies without big funding. Check out my blog and information about my Practical Founders CEO peer groups at practicalfounders.com. And follow me on LinkedIn to keep the conversation going. See you next week.